Well, good morning, amazing church. This is a wonderful church. And I second everything that Pastor John said a moment ago about the ladies' tea yesterday. What a wonderful event I heard. I had a chance to drive in real quick and see right at the end and see all these beautiful ladies coming out, just dressed so nice, and heard so many wonderful things. So thank you, everybody, for your part, and Janice and the team. Amazing. Yes. You know, the Bible calls this day, every Sunday, it actually calls it the Lord's Day. So happy Lord's Day. And but as we've already mentioned, today is a very special Lord's Day because we also get to show some gratitude to someone else, our mothers. I love that there's a Mother's Day. I love that there's a Mother's Day here in America. And did you know that the very first official observance of Mother's Day was held in a church? In fact, it was Anna Jarvis in West Virginia. She organized a memorial service for her mother, Ann Jarvis, on May 10th, 1908 at her church. And then after that, she spent a couple years petitioning government officials to establish a day to honor our mothers. And it was a few years later, in 1914, when President Woodrow Wilson declared Mother's Day a national holiday. So I love that. And I want to, this morning, recognize and appreciate all the mothers in this room. So would you give a hand to all the mothers in this room, please? We've been already clapping a lot today, but I want to give another round of applause one more time to all the grandmothers and great-grandmothers. Would you do that today? Good job, grandmas. We have a couple grandchildren now, and if I'd have known how good that was, I would have had them first before my kids. But that's a loud amen out there. I read about a survey that was conducted by the Wakefield Group, and they revealed, this is kind of astounding, that 85% of millennial moms would like to receive just some acknowledgement from their family and friends that they're doing a good job, more than flowers on this Mother's Day. So make sure you're doing that today, everybody. Make sure you're showing your mothers, your wives, your grandmothers, whoever you can, your aunts, whatever. Let them know how much you appreciate them. And I really do thank all you amazing mothers here at the home church that do such a good job. And to extend that, let me just say, even those of you who are not mothers, the women of this church are amazing. They are amazing people. I'm so glad you're not like the one lady I read about, a young man. He was walking through the supermarket, and he was just picking up a few things, and he noticed a little old lady was following him around. And he wasn't really thinking about it, but she just kept following him. And finally, when he went to go get into line to pay, the lady kind of really quick got in front of him and went there, and he said, "Oh, pardon, I'm sorry, it's okay." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Sonny. I'm sorry also if my staring at you has made you uncomfortable. It's just that you look just like my son, and I haven't seen him in a long time." And it had touched his heart, and so he said, "Well, that's a shame." And he said, "No problem. Go ahead. Is there anything I can do for you?" And she said, "Listen, just to make me feel good, as I'm walking out of the store, could you just wave at me and say, 'Goodbye, Mom'?" And he said, "Oh, it's kind of weird, but okay, sure, I'll do it for you." And so she walked out, and so he said, "Bye, Mom," and she blew a kiss back at him, and she walked out. He got up to the counter, and the person checking him out there said, "Okay, it'll be $127. And he said, "What? Wait a second. I only got a couple things here. How could it be $127? And she said, "Well, your mother said that you'd pay for her." Watch out for some moms. I also want to acknowledge this morning that Mother's Day is a wonderful, wonderful day, but it also can be very difficult for some of you. Like me, some of you no longer have your mother here on earth, and you miss her. This day is always a bit emotional for me. It has been as I've been leading up and thinking about Mother's Day. I miss my mom terribly. We're going to go to the grave this afternoon, and pray as we do every year, and it's amazing how many people are at the graveside on Mother's Day. Some of you perhaps didn't have a good mother, and this is a tough day for you because of that. Some of you are unable to have children. Some of you mothers have children who've walked away from God, and it's a hard day for you. And there are other reasons that this day might be challenging. And I'm so sorry. But in spite of all that, I believe God has an encouraging word. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a few minutes. He has an encouraging word for all of us. Whether you're male, female, old, or young, God's word is for you today. There was a little boy who forgot his lines. He was in a little school play, and he forgot his lines, and his mother was sitting right there in the front row to prompt him. And so she was gesturing, trying to tell him what the words were because he forgot his lines, and he kept drawing a blank. Finally, she leaned over and whispered, "I am the light of the world." So the child, okay, beamed with a big smile and stepped back and gave it with all his might. And he said, "My mother is the light of the world." And I agree, you faithful moms are truly the light. You're a light in this world. Thank you. But I have to say this morning that it saddens me that we live in a time that attacks and devalues biblical motherhood and womanhood. This is not a political issue. This is a spiritual issue. And this has led to all kinds of problems. As somebody has called it, a homicide of the home. And since God is the creator, He is the only one who can tell us what a woman is and what a woman is all about. Sadly, many young women today are fooled into thinking that they need to be something that God never meant for them to be. So thank you, godly mothers and godly women of the home church who have set an example and elevated the wise plan of God in His Word about these things. That's what it's going to take. Today we're going to look at a wonderful true story of a woman with that kind of an example. In spite of terrible times that she lived in, wicked times really, and her own personal pain, she was a magnificent woman who became a magnificent mother. She's most well known for being a praying mother. And there are all kinds of lessons in here that we're going to talk about for every single one of us that we can learn from this praying mother. Her name is Hannah. This true story is found in the book of 1 Samuel. This is an Old Testament book in the Bible that is primarily about Samuel, the prophet. But it's also about Israel's first king, Saul, and then David. And times, as I mentioned, as we open this book, were very bad, morally horrible. It was the time of the judges, wickedness. People were doing what was right in their own eyes. And God needed a prophet to help His people at this crucial point in history. So He raised up this man, Samuel, the greatest man between Moses and David. But it all started with his mother, a godly mother. And by the way, many of the central points in the Bible, most important moments, began with a woman. Eve, Sarah, Jochebed, which was Moses' mother, Esther, Mary, Ruth, and many, many more. But today we're going to look at Hannah, Samuel's mother. And the first thing I want to show you as we begin to just kind of go through chapter 1 here is Hannah's pain. Hannah's pain. And this is your reminder right up front here that everyone goes through pain. Even godly women like Hannah went through pain. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephrathite. And he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now, I want to remind us all right here at the beginning that some things in the Bible are descriptive and not prescriptive. In other words, This is describing how things were, not prescribing how things should be. From the very beginning, God designed marriage to be between one man and one woman. God has never approved of polygamy. In fact, although God seemed to allow it to continue for a while, polygamy is always cast in an unfavorable light in Scripture. God made Adam and Eve. And in every family of the Bible who practiced polygamy that we read about, you always see strife or conflict. And in this time in history, as I mentioned, it was a terrible moral culture, and polygamy was acceptable. And it's sometimes when God is going to make a move and move people and move a culture, it might take some time to untangle all of this. And so Samuel was going to be coming in and helping with all of that, but it was difficult and dark days. There was also an incredible social stigma for infertility. Women were commonly valued for their ability to bear children, especially sons. And having children really was seen as the favor of God on you. And a childless woman would be pitied and whispered about. She'd be viewed as somehow maybe even deficient or even cursed. Children were seen as survival and security. And most scholars think that this may be the reason that Elkanah had two wives here. It's possible that he married Hannah first. We're going to see he really loved her. But because she was unable to have children, perhaps that is when he married again, which would have made the pain even harder. But notice, Peninnah had children and Hannah had none. And that is a recipe for disaster that's going on in this home right now. Verse 3, and this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Again, at this time in Israel's history, it was dark days, and the place of worship was not yet in Jerusalem. It was located at the tabernacle, which was in Shiloh. Elkanah was a good man in spite of his mistakes here. And he worshiped God. And he he would throughout the year worship the Lord with his family. And they would go up, it says, annually to worship and sacrifice. And just a reminder, ladies, your husband may not be perfect. In fact, he's not perfect. And Hannah's wasn't. But he was worshiping God, and he was trying. And we don't know exactly which Jewish feast this was talking about here, possibly the Feast of Tabernacles, which would have been a feast that's all about sacrifices and then a big giant celebration at the end, with a big ceremonial meal. The family would bring an animal to be sacrificed and give it to the priest, and the priest would take that animal, sacrifice a portion of it, and give back the meat to the family so that they could all eat. So I want you to imagine for just a minute this big giant feast day, lots of Jewish families coming in and attending, and tables set up, and everybody enjoying themselves. And you look over at Elkanah's family, and you have Peninnah there, and she has all her little children around her, and they're all sitting there to eat. And then you look over at lonely Hannah, all by herself. The pain was just so deep as they all sat around the table to eat. Verse 4, and when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions. Verse 5, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, or a double portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. I don't know why God does what he does. I don't. God gave Peninnah sons and daughters, so at least 4 children. And she seems like a person with bad character, as we're going to see in a moment. But the Lord had shut the womb of Hannah, a woman with great character, as we'll see. Why does God do things like this? You know, so often in life, we don't understand God's ways and his choices until he completes his plan. Maybe even until we get to heaven. But I want to mention that this whole issue of infertility is such a painful issue for so many. In the United States, the CDC estimates that 8 to 12% of married couples experience infertility. And that translates to 1 in 8 couples. And worldwide, the World Health Organization says infertility affects about 17.5%. And at some point of adults, some point in their life, so 1 in 6 people. But I want you to know that many godly couples in the Bible were unable to have children. Godly couples. That God just withheld this particular thing. And sometimes, as a reminder, infertility is only for a time, as we see in this story. It's a temporary thing. And then God opens the womb. But sometimes God, in His wisdom, chooses to leave the womb closed. And has a totally then, and we can be confident that then God has a totally different purpose for that couple. And that's what Hannah was, or where she was, and things got worse. Her sister wife here makes life even more miserable for her. Look at verse 6. And her adversary also provoked her sore. That means she taunted her mercilessly. This other wife just kept taunting day after day. For to make her fret. That word means to tremble. To make the sound, literally to make the sound of thunder. It's a roaring. It's something within Hannah that maybe even would come out, but she was just beside herself because the Lord had shut up her womb. Verse 7, and as He did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. That is, her sister wife kept provoking her. Therefore, she wept and did not eat. You see the term in that verse 7, year by year. That's a reminder of how long this pain went on. That's how long this painful trial lasted in Hannah's life. Year after year after year, the pain just kept intensifying. To the point that now at this year, as they came to the feast there in Shiloh, Hannah was now sitting at this amazing feast with everybody around, just feeling so joyful. But she could not eat, only weep, it says. I want to stop here and mention that it's just a great thing that Hannah wanted a baby. God also, in His Word, calls children a blessing, and He never calls children a burden. It's a horrible thing today that we have unwanted children. And even worse is when their life is snuffed out before they even have a chance to live. Hannah could never imagine such a thing. She was desperate for a child, and that God had placed that desire in her heart. But oh, the questions Hannah must have asked God year after year, it says. And maybe some of you are in a situation like that where it just feels like year after year. Maybe it's not this issue, but there's painful things, and it's just year after year. Oh, the pain that Hannah felt that she could never escape as she was watching Peninnah's kids grow up around her. And so Elkanah, being the loving husband, he already gave her a double portion of food. He's trying to make her happy and thicken her up, She couldn't eat. Verse 8, he tries to make her feel better. Then said Elkanah, her husband, to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? He did his best. He did his best, okay? Just husbands come wired with a few less pieces, okay, with knowing what to say. That part of the brain that knows what to say, it's difficult. But in Elkanah's defense, I do want to mention something. When you read what he's saying here, perhaps this does mean that he really had been trying to lavish her with love. He was doing all that he could to compensate for her pain. And now it's a good husband. He's trying to do what he could. But truly, nothing Elkanah could take away the ache in her heart. And this is now when we see Hannah's faith. She brings this pain, this deep-seated, difficult thing that she can't get out of, no one has any power over. She brings it to the one who does have power. And number 2, we're going to see Hannah's prayer. Hannah, verse 9, so Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. And she, verse 10, was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. She hit a breaking point on this year and began to pray like she never had before. And this is another great lesson right here. Again, Hannah prayed when her pain was the deepest. She brought her hurts to the Lord. And that is the one thing that you can always do and we always should do. Every pain should turn into a prayer. Every hurt we should bring to the Holy One who can answer prayer. So she brought her hurts to the Lord, and she believed that God could work through this. God could do something. Thank God for praying mothers and fathers and grandparents and uncles and aunts and all of it. Thank God for praying people. But let me tell you, there's something about a mother's prayers. Let me just park here for a minute. I have seen firsthand in our home the power of a mother's prayers. And history is full of amazing power of a mother's prayers. Abraham Lincoln spoke about the prayers of his mother. Augustine, who talked about in his testimony, he couldn't escape his mother's prayers. God just hunted him down until he gave his life to Jesus because of his mother's prayers. John and Charles Wesley would never have had the impact they had without the prayers of Susanna Wesley. The great missionary to China, Hudson Taylor. When Hudson was about 17 years old and he was not seriously following the Lord, even though he was raised in a Christian home. One day, his mother was away visiting some relatives, and while she was away, all of a sudden, she became burdened at this family member's home. And so she kind of went away by herself into a room and began to pray her heart out for her son. And at that same moment, back at home, Hudson was by himself, kind of with boredom, going through the books in his dad's library. And he took out one book, and it was actually just a small little book. It was called Poor Richard. It was really actually a gospel tract. And as he read the phrase, the finished work of Christ. And that statement would not leave his mind, the finished work of Christ. And he suddenly understood that salvation was fully accomplished by Jesus Christ, and it's only received by us through faith. So later, when his mother returned home, Hudson told his mom, he said, "Mom, I want you to know something. I've given my life to Christ." And she was so nonchalant. She walked right by, she said, I know. I was praying, and God told me, you can be done praying. I've just done it. Let me tell you, everybody, this is the kind of thing that happens in a mother's prayer. One pastor found a poem that was with his mother's things after she had died. Here's what it said. It was a mother's secret for success. When in the morning I washed my children, I prayed that they might be washed by the Savior's precious blood. When I put on their garments, I prayed that they might be arrayed by the garments of salvation and the robe of God's righteousness. When I give them food, I prayed that they might be fed with the bread of life. When I started them on the road to school, I prayed that their faith might be as a shining light, brighter and brighter to the perfect day. And when I put them to sleep, I prayed that they might be enfolded in the Savior's everlasting arms. My wife has prayed Colossians 1, chapter 1, verses 9 to 11 for our children, or over our children for many years. I want to read them to you. This is a prayer a mother could pray. Colossians 1, 9 through 11. For this cause Paul is going to pray a prayer for the people in Colossae, and we could take this prayer and use it. For this cause we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you, and to desire that ye might be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, that ye might walk worthy of the Lord unto all pleasing, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might according to his glorious power unto all patience and long-suffering with joyfulness. Any mom can pray that. Any dad can pray that over their children. God is listening to you. Any grandparent can pray that. God is listening to you as you pray. Ruth Graham wrote, "Listen, Lord, a mother's praying. low and quiet. Listen, please. Listen what her tears are saying. See her heart upon her knees. Lift the load from her bowed shoulders till she sees and understands. You hold the worlds together. Hold her problems in your hands. When does parenting start? When does parenting start? It starts when you pray for your children, even before they are conceived. Hannah prayed for Samuel long before he was conceived. And whether you're a mother or not, God has invited us to take our pain to him in prayer. And if you're in bitterness of soul, if you're weeping sore like Hannah about something day after day, take it to the Lord in prayer. God can do something. So here was Hannah's prayer, verse 11, and she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. So Hannah cries out, and she uses the term Lord of hosts, which means commander of the heaven's armies, the leader of all, the one who's in control of all things. I pray to the God who can do something about this. And she kept calling herself in this prayer the handmaid of the Lord. This was her resurrendering herself to the Lord. Lord, I am yours. I am yours. And whatever you say, I will do. And it appears that God then puts on her heart a powerful prayer. A prayer that comes with a vow, a promise. If you give me a son, I will give him back to you forever. And a razor will never come to his head. Now, what did that mean? Well, her son would already be a Levite because his dad was of the Levite tribe, which would mean he is already dedicated to the work of the Lord in the temple, in the Lord's house. However, what she is praying for is a deeper level of devotion to the Lord that her son would have. She would make sure from his birth that this child would be a Nazirite. According to Numbers chapter 6, in God's law, a Nazirite vow was a very special vow that people would usually take for just a temporary period. And what it would involve is abstinence, first of all, from any product of the grapevine. And that would signify to the world and to them that they are going to be distant from all the worldly pleasures. They would also take no part in mourning for the dead or come near a dead body, because the dead show a corruption from sin. And it's also showed that a Nazirite has greater concerns than the ordinary joys and sorrows of life. It was a special vow you would take. And then the never cutting of the hair would be because it was a public, visible sign to others of the vow that you're taking. And again, typically that vow would just be for a short period. Only a couple people in Scripture, it was placed on them for their entire lives. Samuel, as we see here, and then Samson. They were unique. So this was going to be, she's saying, Lord, my child for his whole life will be a Nazirite. We'll have this Nazirite vow upon him. He would quite literally be given to you, God. He will work for you. He will be all about you. And by the way, we need more children who are born as an answer to prayer and then given back to God in prayer after they are born. We need more children like that. Think about who we have in history because of praying mothers who were once infertile. Isaac, Joseph, these are world changers. John the Baptist, and others. We need mothers who want children, mothers who will pray for their children, and mothers who will give them to the Lord. Verse 12, and it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked, and that just means he observed her mouth. Verse 13, now Hannah, she spake in her heart, this is as she was praying, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she had been drunken. So Eli is the high priest. He's the one in charge there at the tabernacle, and he obviously comes to her and sees that she's not just weeping and not just praying. I mean, there's something different about this girl. She's ugly crying, and she's praying. She's saying things with her mouth, but there is no sound coming out. And Eli's not sure about this woman, and so verse 14, and Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. Now, Eli is not very discerning here. This was a woman pouring out her heart to the Lord. But remember, the spiritual temperature of Israel at this time was horrible. Eli's own sons that we heard about earlier, Hophni and Phinehas, were terrible, terrible young men. And it had probably been a long time since Eli had seen somebody giving their wholehearted prayer like this. He didn't recognize. And sadly, he probably usually saw drunkenness. Verse 15, and Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I'm a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial or Satan, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. She explains herself, listen, it's not any of that. I am in deep grief here. But I just have to mention, I think this gives us another clue of where Hannah was spiritually. Right here, Hannah could have become very offended with Eli and stormed out, but she didn't. She was in the right heart place. Her heart was in a good spot. Her eyes were on the Lord. And she understood the situation. In verse 17, then Eli answered and said, Go in peace. Go in peace. And the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. Now, whether this was a specific word from the Lord to Eli or this was just an encouraging word, it almost in the Hebrew just feels like a greeting or a sending off. We don't know, but we know one thing. Hannah sure had a confirmation in her soul here that God was working. Because look what it says in the next verse, 18. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. Nothing had happened, but everything had happened in here. She wasn't pregnant yet, but deep in her soul, she knew that God had heard her prayer. By faith, Hannah was confident that this prayer would be answered. You know, a confidence that God has heard your prayer can just lift you out of sadness. I'm telling you, everybody, if you have something right now that is a deep pain, bring it to the Lord. And number 3, Hannah's provision. Verse 19, and they rose up in the morning early and worshiped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Verse 20, wherefore it came to pass when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived that she bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. The day came, the day she had waited for so long. The child she asked for had come, and she named him Samuel, which means asked of God. What do you need to ask of God? Ask. The same God of Hannah is the same God today who says to us, Come boldly to the throne of grace. And then number 4, Hannah's promise. She has had a child, and now it's time for her to go to Shiloh to the feast again. Verse 21, and the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. Now, here's an interesting moment. Elkanah, it's time to go again, time to make our yearly trek back to Shiloh. You have a baby now, let's go. And she refuses to go. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I could really see a mother at this point doing all that she could to get out of the promise that she made to God. You gave me a child, God, and now I love this baby. I am not bringing my baby and giving him back. I told God I would do this, but think about it. Eli and his wicked sons, Hophni and Phinehas, if I give my son over there, like I said, I don't know. You wouldn't want me to do that, God. It probably wouldn't even be right. How many times do we come up with ways to get out of what we promised to God? I told you I would go to church, God, but it's my one day to get all these other things done. And I really need to get those things done. I told you, God, I'd read the Bible, but it's really hard getting up in the morning. I think I just have a problem. I just have a physical issue. But that wasn't Hannah. That was not Hannah. Maybe one of the hardest things anybody could do would be to fulfill this vow that she made. This makes her one of the greatest mothers in the entire Bible. She put God first. And this is what every child needs. This is what Samuel needed more than anything, a mom who would put God first. A mother and a father who prioritize the Lord. And you can see what she's doing here. Though, when she tells her husband, Elkanah, I'm not going to go with you this year. In fact, I'm not going to go with you until he's weaned. And then I will leave him with Eli. A child in those days would not be weaned until about 3 or 4 years old. This gave her 3 to 4 years to invest all that she could in this child. I could just see Hannah saying, I'm going to teach this boy. I will teach him as much as I can in these years about God. I will point him toward good things. I will teach him the scriptures. I will teach him good discipline. Reminds me of the amazing mother and grandmother, Lois and Eunice, in the New Testament, who taught their grandson and son, Timothy, the things of God, the scriptures. And Paul said, that same faith that was in your grandmother and mother, I now see it in you, Timothy. Mothers, grandmothers. And you could see Hannah saying, this is what I am going to do. I'm going to take this little child and I'm going to bring him before the Lord. Maybe she had something like Susanna Wesley's rules for raising children. Let me read these to you real quick. Here's Susanna Wesley, her great sons, Charles and John, who took the world by storm. She said, number 1, subdue self-will in a child and thus work together with God to save his soul. Number 2, teach him to pray as soon as he can speak. Number 3, give him nothing he cries for and only what is good for him if he asks for it politely. Number 4, to prevent lying, punish no fault which is freely confessed, but never allow a rebellious, sinful act to go unnoticed. Number 5, commend and reward good behavior. And number 6, strictly observe all promises you have made to your child. This is what a mother does. This is what a godly mother does. And this is also why that mothers have so much influence. Even at the youngest age, 2, 3, 4 years old, those ages, you have so much influence. This is such a high calling. I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it tonight. I'm going to preach a message tonight at 6 p.m. based on one thing. I've been thinking just all week long about the different things that, the thumbprints, the impressions that my mother has left in my life. And there's several, and there's one thing that I'm going to pull and talk about tonight. But mothers have a huge imprint on their children. Abraham Lincoln said famously, no one is poor who has a godly mother. This is such a high calling. And can I just say, it grieves me when I hear a young mom maybe say, they're introducing themselves and somebody asks, what do you do? And they say, I'm just a wife and mother. Don't ever let this world take that from you, moms. Don't ever let them steal this high calling from you. It is a high calling. Verse 23, and Elkanah, her husband, said unto her, do what seemeth thee good. Tarry until thou have weaned him. Only the Lord establish his word. This is a couple who believed the Lord. So the woman abode and gave her son suck until she weaned him. Let's go from verses 24 to 28. Follow along with me. And when he had weaned him, she took him up with her, with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. And they slew a bullock and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition, which I asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord, or I have given him back to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. I can't imagine how hard this day must have been for Hannah. In a sense, every parent that's had this happen knows, and every parent knows this, when their children are born, you should know this, God is their parent, ultimately. These are not our children, truly. Every parent understands that part of parenting is surrender. Lord, this is your child, not mine. They're with me for a while, and I'm going to do everything I can to influence them for you, but help me raise them, oh God. They're your children. Did you know that there are some Christian parents who would get angry if God called their child to be a missionary? They want their child to make something of their life, not serve, not do that kind of stuff. Hannah was not one of these parents. One of the things that makes Hannah such a magnificent mother really was her full surrender to the Lord. She had said, I am the handmaid of God. I will do what you ask me to do, God. I'm yours. And she followed through, and she lived the surrendered life. And the Lord took her surrendered offering and made this offering, Samuel, one of the greatest prophets of the entire Bible. An amazing man of God. Here's my question to all of us today. What could God do with your life if it's surrendered to Him? Maybe not in the same way that Samuel was, but all of us need to surrender our lives. God may not be asking us to take a Nazirite vow or something like that, but He is asking everybody to live a surrendered life. Before we close here, let's look at what all of us can learn from today from this praying mother. Let's go through these. Number one, that God often does His greatest work through deep pain. What have we learned here today? That God often does His greatest work through deep pain. We sit here today and we look at the great work that Samuel did, and we read about all the amazing ways that God used him. But Hannah, his mother, remembered the pain that it took to get there. Great mothers have great pains. And mother or not, you may have something that you're going through that you can't see to the other side quite yet. You don't understand God's ways right now. The plan hasn't come together and you don't see it. God often does His greatest work through deep pain. Johnny Erickson Tata, who was paralyzed from the neck down in a diving accident as a teenager, she made an amazing statement that I love and I think about often. God permits what He hates to accomplish what He loves. God permits what He hates to accomplish what He loves. Her suffering became a ministry that has touched millions worldwide, literally. God often does His greatest work through deep pain. And number two, delays are not always denials. Delays are not always denials. For some of you, you need to remember that God might be making you wait, but He hasn't said no. Abraham waited for Isaac a long time. Joseph waited in prison a long time. David waited in caves to become king. God, you anointed me. How come I'm living in caves? How come everybody's against me? Perhaps you've been waiting for a long time for God to do a work. Well, delays are not always denials. Keep praying. Number three, take your hurt to God instead of away from God. Take your hurt to God instead of away from God. We have an Instapot at home, a pressure cooker. And there are times I'll come in and that thing's fully pressurized. And there's steam coming up out of the pressure valve. And if it didn't have that pressure valve on there, that thing would blow up. God designed prayer to be a release valve for the soul. We get all worked up. All these things. God says, come to me. Come to me. Come to me. Pray. You find grace and mercy to help in your time of need. Come. Hannah did not pretend that she was okay. She poured out her grief before God. Hannah could have done a lot of things with her pain as I was thinking through her story. Early on in the story, she could have just said, you know what, Elkanah? I ain't going to Shiloh with you. I ain't going to worship. It's just every time we go there, it reminds me of how much it hurts. She could have lashed out at Peninnah, her sister wife, who was so cruel to her, but we never see her retaliate in this entire story. In fact, Hannah's name means woman of grace. And she lived up to that name. She simply brought her hurt to the Lord, poured out her soul to Him. That's where she took her hurts. And many people have had a Hannah moment. Like she was there just weeping and crying. Many people have had a Hannah moment sitting alone in a parking lot, hearing bad news, gripping the steering wheel, crying where nobody can see them. There are times in life where you just need to pour out your soul to God. And number 4, prayer is powerful when people are powerless. God heard Hannah even when nobody understood her or were powerless to help her. God heard her. Hannah could not have known when she was praying so much in that day where she just felt impressed to pray, pray, pray. She could not have known that those prayers were what the entire nation of Israel were going to be resting on. That nation needed the answer to that prayer, which was Samuel. Imagine what God could do if you continued in weeping and prayer. And number 5, surrender is part of real faith. A closed fist can't receive anything new because it refuses. But once it's released, God can fill that hand. Hannah trusted God enough to hold Samuel with an open hand. God, I give Samuel to you. I give him to you. And her surrender reminds us that all parents have to surrender our children to a certain extent. But really, all of us need to surrender things in our own life to God. If God asks us to give something to Him, no matter what it may be, we need to say, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Because by faith, we know that God has a better plan. God, you have a better plan. William Booth, the founder of Salvation Army, said the greatness of a man's power is the measure of his surrender. There was a young lady who was one day standing and talking to an evangelist, and she was talking to him about the message he just preached about surrender, about consecration, giving your life to the Lord, surrendering your heart and your life to Him. And she said, you know what, I don't dare give myself completely to God because He might send me to China as a missionary. And the evangelist looked at her and said, come here. He said, if some cold, snowy morning, you're out there and you see a little bird half freezing, pecking at your window, if you open that window and if that bird would let you take it in and feed it, and thereby putting itself entirely in your power, what would you do to that bird? Would you crush it and kill it in your hands? Or would you give it shelter, warmth, food, and care? And all of a sudden, the girl understood what he was saying. Oh, now I see. I can trust God with my life. I can give my life to Him. And He's not going to crush me. He has something good for me. He's going to take care of me. What's interesting about this true story is that 2 years later, she came back to that evangelist, and her face lit up when she saw him after, and she talked to him, and she said, do you know where God is now taking me and where he's letting me serve him? And he said, where? He said, to China. You know, God has a way of doing just the right thing in our life. God may not want you to go to China. That's okay. But what could God do if you gave him your life? Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me this morning? This is a Mother's Day, very special day. I love Mother's Day. It's emotional, yes, in one hand, but it is so sweet. Thank God for the amazing mothers all over this world and that make such an impact. But the greatest mothers are the surrendered moms. The greatest moms are the ones who have said, Lord, you have my life. I'm the handmaid of the Lord. And the greatest men, the most powerful men, as William Booth said, the founder of the Salvation Army, he said, the greatness of a man's power is the measure of his surrender. Perhaps today God is speaking to your heart. Maybe you need to just bring something to him in prayer. Something small, something huge.